Good morning. Oh, I want to welcome everyone who's brave enough to show up in person. And for those of you on Zoom, nice and warm at home, welcome as well. But join us next week uh, as we come together. My name is Reverend Jim Ernston. This is Unity of Charlotte. And again, welcome. If you are here for the first time, I'm looking over our crowd here. Please just raise your hand and we'd like to welcome you here on this crisp January morning. So we've all been here once before, but we do like to remind ourselves that no matter where you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. And what happens? Thank you, Alan. I do want to remind us that wherever you are in your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. And we invite you to, good morning, welcome here. We want to remind you to reach out to one of us, either here in person or email or even over the phone, and we will be glad to answer any of your questions about Unity of Charlotte specifically, or about the Unity movement in general. And you can also sign up for our weekly newsletter, which has the specific events that are happening within our community. So do that, sign up for our newsletter. And you can do that on the website, unityofcharlotte.org. So in terms of announcements, and you can see this on the slides, we attended the Martin Luther King Jr. Walk and Wreath Lane last week. It was a huge success. It was, you'll see the small group of us that were walking there, along with a few thousand of our closest friends. And it was a huge success, and we were able to hear speakers at the Wreath Lane as well. It gave me a chance to walk through Uptown, and Michael, is Michael here? No, Michael's not here in person. Michael, if you're online with us as well, I thank Michael for, he is. Michael, thank you for showing me and telling me and giving me the history of the Uptown area. That was well worth the price of admission. So thank you for doing that. Michael is my historian of the area, at least. We'd also like to highlight the idea of our listening circles. Now, that gives us a chance to hear what's on your mind. There we go. And I also want to share with you that not this week, but next week, which will be our last listening circle, is on the 29th of January. That will also be on Zoom. So anybody who has not been able to participate in person, you will have a chance to do that in Zoom. Check the newsletter for that Zoom link. Check the newsletter for the Zoom link for the listening circle for next Sunday. Also, our book study, Uncomfortable Conversations with the Black Man. Please purchase the book ahead of time, and you can do that through Amazon, or you can do that with Kindle, however you purchase books. We're going to have two classes. One will be after the Sunday service in person. We will also hold a repeating Zoom class, so you don't have to do both of them. Pick either Sundays or pick either Thursdays at 7 p.m., which will be on Zoom. And please register for that. Let us know. Email admin@unityofcharlotte.org in order to let us know. We are sending out material ahead of time. So if you don't register, you're not going to get that material. Please register ahead of time. Also coming up, Coffee with the Ministers. It is a Zoom event, and Pub Theology is in person. Coffee with the Ministers is once a week, Fridays 9 a.m. Pub Theology is once a month, kind of a special thing, and that is on the first Thursday of each month at 5 p.m. And our first one will be on February 2nd. And we have, of course, our ongoing offerings. A Course in Miracles is on Zoom. Dialogue as Service is on Zoom. Intentional Meditation on Zoom. The Belmont study group is in person, and the men's group, the first and fourth Wednesdays, is in person here in the building. So, and of course, all that information is in our newsletter as well. So please join me in our prayer for oneness this morning. So together, there is one presence and one power in my life and universe, God, the good, omnipotence. Also, if you know of anyone in your life, a loved one, a friend, even someone that you don't know very well who is in need of prayer, let's spend a moment just to hold them in prayer. So here's a chance for us to gently say out loud their name. We will hold these folks in prayer for whatever their need is. Go ahead and say their name now. Amen. There are links on our website for Silent Unity, which is a 24/7, 365-day prayer ministry. And I utilize that every day almost. You can either call them on the phone, or I use their little You Pray app on my smartphone. Let's go ahead and move into the daily word. Today's daily word is power. My thoughts and words reflect my divine inheritance. When I listen to my inner conversations and recurring thoughts, I may hear fear-based limiting talk, or I may hear positive words encouraging me to live joyfully and confidently. The choice is mine. Through my divine gift of power, I take command of my thoughts and my life. I release thoughts of powerlessness, and as I do, my negative self-talk diminishes. I affirm my divine inheritance of faith, wisdom, understanding, and strength with my thoughts, words, and actions. The power to live a full life is mine. I embrace insights I've gained through experience. I own my mistakes without shame or embarrassment. I am eager to learn. I am willing to try new things and stretch myself. In power, I thrive. From the Old Testament book of Proverbs, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. My thoughts and words reflect my divine inheritance. Let's go ahead with as we look for our next space to be together, we are using this affirmation to help us find that space, our next meeting space. So together, let's say, we affirm that we have a new home for Unity of Charlotte that fulfills every need for space and use in order to support and share our unified purpose, to love, grow, and serve. And so it is. So this is our second week of a 3-week series of transition and change within our lives. And Reverend Lisa is speaking on that second phase for us today. Please welcome Reverend Lisa Herklotz.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. I found that Eddie Watkins Jr. song. I love his music. One of these days we're going to get him here live. And we'll all be up dancing because he does not let you sit for long. Get out of the way. Such a perfect way to start this talk, because as Reverend Jim just said, we are in the second of a 3-part series about transition as spiritual awakening. Transition is any change. And if there's one thing we know about life, is change is the one constant, right? But some changes are small. They don't really seem to require a lot of effort on our part, but other changes are very good at providing some very deep and profound experiences. And when we face them as a spiritual awakening, then they become a very rich experience and not one that we dread. So the first thing that Reverend Jim talked about, we're using this book. Most of our talks are coming out of Finding Yourself in Transition by Unity author Robert Brumet. I see some of you know him. He's been around a long time, a very amazing author. He has a way of writing about very deep subjects in a simple way. And so if you want to, I would encourage you to get the book because I just find myself living it because we are in so much transition right now, both personally and as a spiritual community, and even as a global community. In his book, Robert Brumet says, most transitions have 3 phases: endings, the void, and new beginnings. Endings, the void, and new beginnings. Endings, there's always something ending when we start, when something's changing. When something's changing, that's what change is, right? Is that something is ending and something else is beginning. But it doesn't always go that instantaneously. So there's this transition phase we go through, and in the ending phase, Reverend Jim talked about the 4 Ds. Does anyone remember those? Disengagement, absolutely. That one apparently spoke to you. I know disorientation is another one, spoke to me. Disenchantment. And what's the 4th one? Disidentification. These are the 4 Ds that happen when something starts ending, because it's something that we've used to identify who we are and to carry on what we think the meaning of our life has. And so when we go through these 4 Ds, we necessarily move into the next phase, which is the void. And while the void, or while the endings are a time of probably a little bit of turmoil and confusion, the void becomes a time when we might feel a sense of emptiness and flatness. Well, aren't you glad you came in on this Sunday for this message? Woo! Let's go. It sounds like the void. I thought it was make a great name for a ride at the Carowinds, a roller coaster that takes you up and then drops you down into the darkness and the void. But hang in there, because despite these descriptions, the void is actually a very profound place to be. A very profound place to be, because when you understand you're going through transition, and because we are spiritual beings with a foundational understanding that there is one power in this universe that's ever present, we can utilize this time in a very, very profound way. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So first, what is the void? I think we have a tendency to think change. So change is we're going from point A to point B. And this is hard to do with a microphone, but I'm going to try. Point A, point B. And we think change is, okay, here we're going to make some change in here. Oh, now we're at point B, all done. Wouldn't that be nice? Now, minor changes probably do feel like that way. Like if I change the flavor of my toothpaste, not going to be this profound transformative experience, right? I can probably go do. No, look, new toothpaste. Everything's cool. But many of our changes are much more profound than that, aren't they? We relocate to a new place and leave what we called home behind. We experience the loss of a loved one, or perhaps we have a loved one who's going through a very serious illness. Perhaps we ourselves are going through some type of illness or injury that requires some profound change in our lifestyle. There's so many changes going on right now as a spiritual community. And I really want to look at this as part of why Reverend Jim and I picked this topic or felt inspired to talk about this, is because as a spiritual community, we are going through profound change. I don't have to really tell you that. You know that you lost ministers in the past. You've experienced the pandemic. You sold the building that you called your spiritual home. And now you've hired 2 new ministers that you're just now getting to know. And I want to be here and tell you that Reverend Jim and I have joined you in this journey. And together we're going to walk through this transition and allow it to be the profound transformative experience that it can be. Because the new beginnings are just around the corner. They're coming. So this little linear idea of going from point A to point B, in a more profound change, such as we're looking at, it's more like, here you are at point A, here's point B, and you go do, and then you climb back up to get to point B. That's really what transformative change looks like. And this is where the ending is, and this is where the void is. It's a deep place, and it's a place that we go to that's deep within us. And it's a place where we can't move forward by doing. We can only sit in the being. And for many in our Western culture, we're not taught how to do that. We are a doing, accomplish, set a goal and get it done. We live like that. And I know that I lived most of my life that way. And it's still a practice. There's some of us here who go sit in silence for 30 minutes and practicing insight meditation to exercise that muscle of just sitting and being. Sometimes these are changes we have chosen, and sometimes they're changes that feel as if they've been thrust upon us. But regardless of how it came about, the experience is the same. You go through that ending, you get disoriented, you disidentify, you're letting go of the old, and you plunge into this quiet, dark space. And it can seem scary because this is a place where your habitual defenses are gone. That got left at the endings. You know, your routines that you did every day that felt comfortable and easy may all be gone. And now you're sitting in this new place and you don't have those defense mechanisms up, and those things that are in our unconscious start to come up. But this is not bad. This is good. Because if we can stay in that place in faith that God is good and God is omnipresence, omnipotence, God's all powerful, God is ever present, and we are that presence, even when we don't feel it. In Eddie's song that we just heard, he said, you wouldn't plant a seed and then dig it up to see how it's growing, would you? You may not have gotten that last line. He says it pretty fast, but I loved it. The idea that you plant the seed in the ground, that's kind of like where we are in the void. A new seed of something, a new beginning has been planted in the void, but you have to let it sit and be nurtured. And it gets nurtured not by our outer workings. It gets nurtured by our inner spiritual power. There's our word power for today. And we have to wait, right? How many of you have ever planted a plant from a seed? Okay, you know what I mean. Then you put it in a little pot, you cover it up with dirt, you put it in the window where it gets sun, you give it a little water, and then do you poof, have a plant? No. Every day you probably walk by and go, how are you doing in there? And you let it be. And you let it get sunshine and nourishment. You get water and nourishment. That's our spiritual food. We do that through our spiritual practice. And then one day, you see a little sprout. So that seed's not just sitting in there. There's work happening, very important work, foundational core level work. That's allowing that seed to create roots that are going to let it come out into a brand new expression. And that's part of being in the void. We're little seedlings. Now, in his book, Robert Brumet compares, or he uses the story of Moses leading the Israelites out of enslavement in Egypt and into the wilderness. And they wander in the wilderness. So the ending is they cross that Red Sea and they're now free. They're no longer enslaved by the Egyptians. But now they're not home, they're in the wilderness. And they have to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. And he likens this to this transition process. We let go of something that we were limited by before, but we're not quite to that brand new expression yet, usually because there's some old habits and old beliefs that need to be cleaned up and let go of in order to come into a brand new expression. When I think about my own life, I have experienced this. A little bit of it, there's been so many. So I was happy to talk about the void because it's become something I've become familiar with now. And I understand the gifts it brings. So one example would be when I worked full-time and went to ministerial school part-time. And then at some point I had to make a choice because my school part was done and I was ready to do an internship. And I couldn't see how I could both work and do this internship. So I kind of came to this crossroads and went, okay, do I put my internship off and keep working, or am I ready to let go of that financial security and dive in? And so I was in that stage of something's going to end here. I don't know what. And then I got an offer for early retirement. So to me, that was the universe's answer. I said, okay. I took the early retirement and I thought, okay, I know retirement's a big deal. When you've been working especially in a corporate structure that you're very used to. And so I was prepared, right? I thought, and I wasn't just going to do nothing. I was moving into my kind of second career. But it was so interesting how uncomfortable I got. And how disoriented I felt when I no longer had this daily routine of an 8 to 5. And I didn't realize how much my life had been organized around my workday. And when I didn't have that, it was really uncomfortable. And there was a lot more disidentification going on than I thought, because I was moving into another career, but really I was disidentifying myself as a corporate team member to stepping into a role as minister, but not quite there yet. So understanding this is what I'm going through. This is the void. Oh yeah, I'm familiar with this place. And I could just let it be because trying to make, well, let me move forward because I'm going to come back to trying to make decisions during this time. So the Israelites are wandering in the wilderness. They've had the ending of enslavement. They're wandering in the wilderness. Moses goes up to the mountain to get the commandments. And while he's gone, they get scared. They get the uncomfortableness is too much. So they fall back on some old idol worship. Right? How often do we, when we're feeling really uncomfortable and things have been shaken up, that we fall back to old routines, old patterns? It's very interesting because I have watched several people go through the death of a loved one and go back to their old church. Leave unity for a moment, go back to their old church because there were some kind of rituals or patterns or speaking, or there was something about it that they knew as a child that gave them comfort, and they thought, I need that. Most of them ended up back at Unity shortly after, but we're drawn to old things to try to feel better. So it's just something to be really aware of because it's a strong pull. So Moses came down, got them all straightened out, and they started wandering again. And then they came close to the promised land. But as they got close to it and started scouting it out, they got afraid, and they got so fearful and so full of suspicion that they couldn't enter in, and they had to wander another 40 years. So what he says is sometimes what happens when we're in this stage of the void, the in-between phase, is we look for that new thing and we think we're ready for it and we try to go for it and it falls apart. And we feel even more uncomfortable and disoriented. I had an experience like this when I was in one of my corporate jobs, and the environment was getting very toxic. I was very unhappy. I wanted to leave. And I started looking for ways to leave, although I was also starting to do some work, because I've done this long enough to know that wherever I am, it is offering me lessons that I'm supposed to get. And until I get through those lessons, I won't really be able to move on to that new thing. I know that. But I'll try anyway. So what happened is I started to investigate a route of becoming a therapist. I was going to go back to school. I have a bachelor's in psychology. I was going to go back to school. I was going to become a therapist, and that was going to be my new career, and I could get out of where I was. And I was excited because this felt right. I was really excited. I talked to Reverend Jim. I looked at schools. We talked about moving to Tallahassee, where they had a great program at the University of Florida. That's the curriculum I ended up with. And I would sit in meditation. I always ask, is this my path? And I got a really clear no. And I thought, okay, let me ask again. I'm really excited about this path. Is this the way I can go? And the answer was very clearly, no, this isn't your path. Well, I just didn't want to hear that because I so wanted to get out of where I was. I so much wanted to get out of the wilderness that this route looked like a good one, and I wanted to take it, even though I kept hearing, no, that's not for you. So I tried. I kept taking steps forward to try to make it happen. And you know what? It didn't work. It was clunky. It was uncomfortable. It wasn't coming together until I finally said, this is not where I'm supposed to do. This is not where I'm supposed to go. I hear you. All right. Well, within a few months, Reverend Jim and I started talking to each other and saying, you know, I'm feeling a call to be a minister. I wonder if that's what I'm supposed to do. And that became our path. And that was a big yes. And honestly, that was not a path I ever saw myself taking, just to be totally honest. But when we started to explore it, it just kept getting brighter and brighter, and a bigger yes and a bigger yes. And here we are. But the idea is, along the way, there's where that discomfort makes us try to get out of it, right? Instead of being okay sitting in it. It's okay to feel the discomfort, knowing that seed of new beginning is working. That means it's working. So we let it work. The Israelites, of course, did finally do their second 40 years. They matured. He talks about the fact the old generation had to die out, and it had to be a new generation that came into the new beginning. Now, for all of those of us here who consider ourselves the older generation, if they're not talking about age, we're talking about consciousness. The old consciousness of old beliefs and old ideas have to be let go of. They have to die. They have to fall away so that this new thing can be birthed within you. Within this community, it's part of our listening circles. It's part of what process we're stepping through with you to go through the endings and then into the void, and to sit and begin to let go of what we are no longer and begin to receive the vision of who we are in our new beginnings. And I truly believe Reverend Jim and I were called here because there's some amazing new beginnings for Unity of Charlotte. And we're here to walk with you on that journey. So I forgot all about my slide about the seed. Yeah, let's go back to that first one. Yeah, I was talking about the seed. This was a lovely little poem that was within the book that says, "The seed that is to grow must lose itself as seed, and they that creep may graduate through chrysalis to wings. Wilt thou then, O mortal, cling to husks which falsely seem to you the self?" So there are parts of ourself that we thought we were that we can let go of now. There's parts of who we thought we were as Unity of Charlotte that we'll be letting go of as we go through our own transformation and develop brand new wings. So the next slide is something I found from Eric Butterworth that I like because it reminds me of what we are really about and what is this transition process about. Eric Butterworth, who's a Unity, foundational Unity minister and author, says, because the Christ mind indwells us, we have an undeniable capacity to be transformed into consciously illumined beings. We have an undeniable capacity. This is the kind of faith that gets me through the void. Knowing that I have this capacity, you have this capacity, together we have this capacity to allow and nurture this transformation and discover our new beginnings. So I'm going to end with a couple of ideas of what do you do when you're in this phase? Now we've talked about it, what it feels like. I've talked to you about some of the temptations I've experienced myself. So what can help us get, well, I don't even want to say get through, what helps us to sit in a way that allows this phase called the void to be effective? I heard patience. Oh, determination. Germination. Well, I like all of those. For germination, you need determination and patience. They work. Thank you. One of the things that the author says is the way out of the void is the way in. Move into it. Accept this as a very powerful and necessary phase to allow for this transformative experience to come to fruition. He says, embrace the experience fully and don't be afraid if it doesn't feel good. Acknowledge, I feel uncomfortable. I feel afraid. I feel anxious. I feel stressed. Acknowledge those feelings. They're part of what's going to come up in this phase. and then let them go. And they'll come up again and let them go. They may come up again and you let them go. Affirmations really help here. And I'm going to leave you with an affirmation that I hope will be helpful. It's also to remember, not only do we appreciate, honor and appreciate that this is an important phase we're in. And you might do that by creating a ritual. You know, our burning bowl and our white stone, those are all rituals we do together. You can have your own little ritual to remember and honor the phase that you're in. Use prayer and meditation as a regular practice. A regular practice. Even sometimes I'm not that good at that, but I can feel it when I'm not, especially when we're in such a crucial phase of change. Prayer and meditation are what keep us connected to Source, and that keeps us connected to our power of faith and our power of strength to know, as uncomfortable as this may be, it is the seed breaking out of the husk to grow new roots, and it's happening in me and you. Don't rush the process. Every day, allow. Every day, recognize. I don't rush through this. You can't rush a seed to grow. You have to let it grow. That's where that patience and determination are to allow the germination. It's a good idea to avoid making major decisions. Avoid making major decisions if at all possible, and long-term commitments. If something comes up that you feel like you have to make a decision on, just say, I'm not ready yet, but I will know when I'm ready. That was that therapist thing. It was not time. It was not my time. I wasn't ready. And when I started to be ready, the right thing showed up. And that takes a good deal of patience and faith. Finally, be gentle with yourself. Be gentle. Nurture. You don't know the timeline for this kind of process. And that's a really hard thing for most of us. I want to know, okay, I'm going through this phase, and at this period, it's going to be done, and I'll be ready to move the next phase, right? We like to work in boundaries and limitations, but that doesn't work for this phase. So be gentle with yourself and allow. And I'm going to end with this last little reading from Irene Malik, who is a New Thought author, because I think it's a wonderful synopsis of the void. There is a loving intelligence that pervades all things. There is a loving intelligence that pervades all things. All that is necessary is for us to maintain our trust and hope, even though we live in the midst of uncertainty. Faith is our willingness to take the next step without fear or looking back, and yet have the patience to allow divine order to work through our situation without trying to force the results ourselves. Allow it to work through us without trying to force the results. Do we have a part in this? We absolutely do. We have to be present for this process, but we don't tell it or force it towards a result that we've created until that becomes an inspired vision. And then all our energy will move toward it naturally. So I did come up with this affirmation that I thought might be helpful. If you find another affirmation that will be helpful when you find yourself in, and this is a process, I should say, that you will come and go out of, because there's different changes we're dealing with in our life, right? So we're in all different phases of this process with each change that we're experiencing. So it's not like a nice, clean, linear process of ending, void, new beginning. Oftentimes we may go back to the ending, especially if we try to pick something up, right? I picked something up and went, okay, well, now I have to go through another ending. Let that go back into that space of quiet and being and listening. And new beginnings, you may begin to get your vision, but it may take a moment to come to fruition. Let that be. Let that be. Everything I need comes to me in perfect time, space, and sequence. Do you want to say that with me? Everything I need comes to me in perfect time, space, and sequence. This is based on something I read from Louise Hay. Yes, a beautiful way of expressing this process. All right. So we've just journeyed through the wilderness a little bit. Let that be okay. Let that be okay. It helps when I feel that void, that emptiness, that sense of unfulfillment, to remember and honor the process I'm in, knowing that there's a seed growing within me that is maturing. And when it comes to fruition, it will be magnificent. And it's so for each of you. And it's so for us as a community. So let's now take a moment to just take all this into meditation. Take this in deep into your heart by gently closing your eyes if that's comfortable. If you're online, find a place to sit quietly. If it's possible, have your feet on the ground. If that's comfortable, your hands on your lap. And let your attention just turn within, away from the outer noises, away from the outer sensations. If it helps, focus on your breath, breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. Follow that cycle another couple of times as you let your body relax a little more. Let your mind settle a little more. And feel your energy and focus come to your heart center. Take a moment to bring to mind a situation that's very current for you, very present, a situation where you're going through change. Probably one that feels challenging. And as you bring that situation to mind, begin to feel where you feel it in your body. What are you feeling as you think about it? Does it feel a little fearful, a little stressful? Or perhaps it's just a little uncomfortable. There's some sense of unease. Or perhaps you already feel very open to it. Whatever you're feeling, name it and find it and see where you feel it in your physical form. And just let it be what it is. Recognize it, accept it, and honor it as part of this incredible transition you're going through. And know that by the very nature of a transition, it will pass. It passes by allowing space for it. And that's the void. The void is space, a wide open space in the quiet, dark stillness of our soul. Invite your thoughts and your feelings about this change into that space and just let it be. If it starts to feel too fearful or overwhelming, use the affirmation. Everything I need comes to me in perfect time, space, and sequence. The power of God is present. I live and breathe in that power. In this space, we honor whatever shows up. Allow it to be, and then allow it to go. As we continue to open that space up for that seed to take root and to begin to grow into a whole new experience we have yet to discover. Everything I need comes to me in perfect time, space, and sequence. And when you're ready, gently bless that space, this space within you. Bless that space. Bless those feelings, those thoughts. Bless this process. And then begin to move your attention and your consciousness back into the room. Feel your body sitting in the chair, fully supported. And then take a deep cleansing breath in and let it out on a sigh. And here you are.
Now's a time in our service where we move into our offering. And we know that as we give, we receive. And it is through our generous gifts that we continue to be a light into our community, into Charlotte as well. So with that, let's move to that next slide where we have our offertory blessing, where together we say, joyously I give this gift, knowing the divine presence blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. So please stand. We will form a circle and sing our peace song.